Okay, here we are.
They can
Now,
just find me wherever.
we're talking with Carlos himself. As you can see, he's a very good looking young man. He has fish behind him. Some people think they're fish.
Oh,
Knowing more about Carlos than I did before, they're actually other god minions. So he might grow technicals and will have to leave. Because being an elder god in charge of KDP, he may have to go and eat someone. You know how that goes. I've had my problems with KDP. I'm sure you've had your problems with KDP. Now we're talking to the man as an elder god controls KDP. At least it's been alleged. Alleged. But no further
okay,
ado,
just
it's alleged. With no further ado, how you doing,
alleged.
Carlos?
Doing fine. Thank you so much for having me over.
Well, in the show, I'm so glad that when you asked if people interested in having you on yet, then I reached out to you. You're able to come on. It means a lot to me.
No, it means a lot to me too because ultimately, what I'm trying to do is, get my name out there, get my book out there, and get people to read the book. It means a lot to me. So, I really do appreciate you giving me the space to do that.
No problems. Explain to the audience. The bottom of the scroll is where you can find this book on Amazon. I don't know why we have that long stream is, but I clicked and I copied and pasted. So it's not right. It's me. It's not my fault. I apologize.
No problem. Like if they take that, all they do is just cut it off right before the question mark. So it
Right.
has a question mark. Just cut it off right before the question mark. That's how you find a book. Or you can just go to Amazon and search for White Harbor, and that's the title of the book.
So what got you interested in doing horror?
Well, I was kind of a lonely kid when I was young. I was kind of a lonely kid, kind of a solitary kid, and I went through a lot of bullying at school. Also, I'm an only child, so I spent most of my time at home. Um, and I used to spend my time watching TV, reading books, reading comics, and so that eventually I got fascinated with horror, especially because I'm Costa Rican. I grew up in Costa Rica. I live here, and part of the culture here is a lot of that kind of like mysticism or
Oh,
spirituality or scary
right.
stories that there are. So, for example, like one horror story that is prevalent all across Latin America is La Llorona, like the crying woman. So this is
Okay.
that they actually made a movie a couple years ago that was just really bad. But so that legend is all over Latin America. So you can imagine my surprise when I was growing up in my little hometown, and I had some cousins that lived by the river, and they said that that was the place where La Llorona's children, drowned. So that's the kind of culture you grow up in when you grow up here. That whatever weird thing that happened like right across the street, um, and that inspired me a lot, I guess, to get into
I,
horror.
I have to say, there's a lot of fascinating mythology, folk heroes, folk saints in Latin
Mhm.
America. We use some of that for my book, Narco Saints. Um,
Really?
or yes, we had a D agent run into a cartel killer with a bit of a backstory. It was,
Mhm.
by the way, I'm talking not about my book. We're talking about your great book. Anyway, so
No,
how long
that's
have you been
okay,
writing
Nora.
books
Go
for?
ahead. I'm
How long have you
sorry.
been writing books for?
So books only the one that I just published, but I used to write short horror stories, and I used to publish them on this website that I used to have. And the thing is, that was what, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and eventually the site went down. But at that time, one of the things is that there was this one story that about it was called Memories of Age, and this story, I mean, it was read by about 5,000 people at the time,
Wow.
and I was really really excited about it, but I never kind of got the courage of saying, okay, I'm going to make this a proper novel and publish it until like late last year. That's when everything started coming together, and I started going back to those stories and putting everything together and finding all the different inspirations to bring into it. And now there's a book. Well, the first of 3 books that are planned.
Outstanding. We love trilogies. We do indeed, because you
Yeah.
get more involved in the story. I'm sure the story goes different ways. People come and go.
Exactly. And I didn't just want to tell like a very shallow horror story. I mean, one of the things I believe when it comes to horror is that you have to care about the characters.
Yeah.
Uh, that way, if something really horrible happens to somebody, you care. It's not just like, oh, that person was just cannon fodder. So that's one of the things I like. I like taking my time developing the characters, getting you to either really like the characters or really hate the characters, so that whenever something happens, it feels like something eventful took place and you care about it.
Absolutely. And do you have a world book? Have you created a world book?
Not really, not as such. Basically, what I'm basing myself on is the short story I had written before. That kind of gives me like the blueprint. And then from there, I kind of branch out into different things. And that's where I put in like some of my local mythology, some of the influences from other books and other fiction that I've read before, but I give it my twist based on my experiences and the local mythology here in Costa Rica.
What any horror writers have influenced you at all, sir?
So, well, definitely Stephen King. I know that at this point it's cliche, but Stephen King. The first book I read by Stephen King was Pet Cemetery,
Okay.
and I love that book. Same with Salem's Lot, and there's a lot of Salem's Lot in White Harbor in my book. Because since it's about a town and it's about very much like the house that was right across the street from where I lived, which was just the creepiest house you can possibly imagine. There was a lot of influence from the way you build this kind of notion of a town, this
Okay.
dynamic of everybody knows everybody and everybody talks about everybody, and that gossip and those secrets and those little things by themselves become part of like a whole character within the town. So that's one of the big inspirations, Stephen King. Then H.P. Lovecraft, when it comes to cosmic horror, I like horror that makes you feel like this tiny,
Okay.
not just because it's because of a huge creature, but it's because of something that is so incomprehensible that it makes you feel insignificant.
Sure.
And then I guess the last one is not so much an author, but a video game. It's Silent Hill.
Okay.
What I get from Silent Hill again is this idea of how there can be two sides of reality,
Mhm.
like what you see and what might be hidden behind that. And that creates an atmosphere of you never know what's right behind what you're looking at right now. And that's one of the things that inspires me a lot.
Interesting. What's your favorite Lovecraft story?
That would be Nyarlathotep. It's probably one of the shortest ones, but it's my
Yeah.
favorite one.
Huh. Most writers I know go with Shadows over Innsmouth.
Yes, and the thing is that so the Innsmouth book, well, the main Innsmouth book, which is Shadows over Innsmouth, and then there's the other one, which is the thing at the doorstep. I think it was the name of it. That also relates to Innsmouth. Those are really really good, but they're more like monster stories. What
Okay.
draws me to Nyarlathotep is this idea of, I guess, insignificance
Sure.
and insanity, and that sometimes through insanity you can find joy in horror.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
because I mean, the whole thing about Nyarlathotep is this guy goes to see Nyarlathotep, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm so scientific, I'm so intelligent, I'm like the smartest guy ever," and he expects to just find like one of these people that does magic tricks, and what he's shown pretty much drives him crazy. And it's not just him going crazy, but pretty much everyone around him, and they kind of relish their insanity to the point in which they're just kind of walking to their deaths, laughing and screaming, and it becomes this whole thing of, you mean nothing amongst this crowd of insane people. But it's that for me is what's so chilling about that story.
Lovecraft is good at that. Doggone the same thing. It's usually incredibly weird things going on.
Sorry.
Same thing with Dion.
Oh yeah.
I mean, incredibly weird things going on. The guy doesn't have a chance in hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get really weird. It's good at doing the really weird stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think like recently in this Guillermo del Toro's Netflix show, Cabinet of Curiosities, he did Pigman's Model,
Yeah.
which is another one of my favorites. They changed it a lot because Pigman's Model doesn't really have much of a plot. It's just a bunch of guys talking about this guy, and then one of them gets curious, meets the actual model of a painting, and turns out to be this creature. But they did also play with that theme I was talking about previously of there's reality and there's what's behind that reality. And that has always been something that I love.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, here, I live in Racine, Wisconsin, which is an old dying town on the Great Lake, right?
Uh-huh.
And across the street from me used to be a path that would take you down into a park. Well, the stone pillars, old stone pillars. Of course, I had to find, fell over. I found one tucked here, right? And I use it as a display of the weird because, it's stone pillar, but if you didn't know it was a stone pillar built to support a fence, it looks really freaky. And my lovely bride found herself a table, and the bottom of the table, the feet that hold the table up, are fish. Yes, fish.
But like live fish?
They're live fishes and models of fish, right?
Oh, okay.
So you put the two things together, it looks really, really freaky, especially talking to people about Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's idea.
Yeah, he always had this thing for tentacles and fishy things. So.
Yes, he did. And the idea is people can get scared. Some people enjoy being frightened, right? It's what makes them be frightened that they enjoy being frightened by. I mean, I don't think people want to watch, say, the cartel killers take place. I mean, Christ, you can see videos of people with the kids cut off, right? Which is much fun.
Yes.
But seeing a show where behind the doorway or behind whatever in the basement is the vampire, or they tell you never, 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 never go here. And of course, you go there, and bad things happen to you.
And I think you touch on a very important point about horror, and it's like being able to experience those things that in real life you wouldn't want to experience.
Yeah.
Like in this case, like somebody tells you don't go there, and in real life you're probably not gonna go there because you don't want to die. But by reading it in a horror book or watching it in a horror movie, I guess it's kind of like a safe way to put your mind on the characters, in the character's head, and accompany them into that place where you're not supposed to go.
Right, because we would hope that there's a commercial up here that ran around Halloween with a group of people hiding in the bar because their car broke down. And they say, well, do you want to go down the street and find the policeman, or do you want to go to the spooky place? So of course they want to go to the spooky place. So they start going to the spooky place, the noise is behind them. They go, let's go to let's go to the garage. Then let's hide in the garage. Inside the garage, which is open to the world, there's all kinds of sharp implements, right? And then making one poor decision after another poor decision. And it's very funny to watch. I'm not doing it justice explaining it, but the idea is we see this in horror films all too often. People making the dumbest mistakes ever.
It's kind of a way for us to assure ourselves of like, see, that was stupid. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that thing that person did there. See what they did. See what happened to them. That's why I wouldn't do it.
That's right. I mean, thank God gave us more sense than they have, right? I mean, but where would we be Have you seen the movie Evil Dead?
Yes.
Is that the movie with the other book? The guy starts off by saying, "Never, never,
Yep.
never, never, ever read this book." He starts reading it, right? Because
Exactly.
most, because it's a short movie when the guy says, "Oh, never, never, never read this," and he throws it in the fireplace, right? It's a short film.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's so there are these YouTube videos that are like the pitch meeting for different movies. The guy's name is Ryan, and I don't remember his last name, but what he does is that he discusses the plot of a movie, but like as if it's like the movie writer talking to the movie producer. And one of the things that happens all the time is like he says, "Oh, and then they go into this room and they get killed." And he's like, "But why did they go into that room if they knew they shouldn't go there?" So the movie can happen. So it's kind of that. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, 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 no. It's my bad. I enjoy the old Hammer films, right? For all the typical reasons, right?
Mhm.
Good-looking women, well built, right? Nice cleavage, right?
Mhm.
Men being suckered into the embraces, right? Or the vampire gets the girl, whatever it might be, right?
Mhm.
I like those movies a lot. I always found them kind of titillating, kind of scary. Even this French, the Vincent Price, like Oblong Box, The Banshee, The
Uh-huh.
Witchfinder General, kind of scary films, right? But now you see the torture porn stuff. I don't understand
Yeah.
why we got into torture porn. Can you explain that, perhaps?
So I mean, torture porn right now has kind of fallen out of
Thank God.
popularity. People
Yeah.
don't really like it that much anymore. But there was a time, I think it was like in the early 2000s, where you had like Hostel, and you had The Cabin in the Woods, and oh no, not The Cabin in the Woods. I'm sorry, Cabin Fever,
Yep.
which were kind of torture porn, or just watching people die for the sake of watching people die. And uh, there was just zero content to those. I guess people just wanted to see, something bloody, something horrible. Oh, the light went off there. It's automatic, so that's how it goes off. Um, so right now, I guess what I've noticed with the rise of like filmmakers like Ari Aster, like Mike Flanagan, you start you start seeing people that like horror movies that will scare them, that might have the violence and the scares and everything, but that have content to them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the trend now. Like the idea of just a movie where something appears out of nowhere and goes boo. It People like it for the the scares, but
Sure.
the idea is to have something with a little more depth. Like if you go and watch Midnight Mass
Okay.
on Netflix, that movie for me is just sorry, that miniseries for me is like just bliss, because it's very slow. It's very slow in the
Yes.
beginning. It's just kind of building and building and building and putting like the little pieces in
And together, right?
place, and then once it gets going, it's just pure horror. And that's what movies used to do. Like if you watch Alien,
Yes.
if you watch Alien, that movie, you don't really, I mean, nothing really monstrous happens. The monster doesn't even appear until like halfway through the movie. um, and you barely see it. It's all about build up, about suspense, and then it pays off. Obviously, if you end up, building up a lot of suspense and then nothing happens, then you end up with a really boring movie.
Yes.
Uh, but also, if the movie is just, blood for the sake of blood, it just gets
Yeah.
boring, I guess.
I agree 100%. I mean, I'm not a 16-year-old boy bringing his hot date to the movie theater, hoping that, if we get scared together, something else might happen, right? I want, I want a plot of a film that makes me think. That's always not. It's okay to be totally mindless trash. It's okay, right? But
Yeah,
generally speaking, I want some kind of a plot. I want the plot to make
yeah.
a little bit of sense. Please.
It also depends on the audience. I mean, if you're like having like some drinks with friends and you want to put on a horror movie to watch, I mean, you're not going to put on like this really heady,
Right.
brainy, psychological horror movie because everybody will just get bored. What you want to put on is something like I don't know, like the ABCs of Death or the
Okay.
A to Z of Death. I don't remember if that's
ABC Death. You got it right first time, yes, sir.
the ABCs of Death. Yeah, because that one is just a bunch of really short movies of people dying,
Yes.
and that for a party, fun. But for me, like to sit down and watch it and get engrossed and just taken over by the movie, that's it needs to be something with content.
100%. If you had to recommend two movies that people should watch today, would those two movies be?
Okay, so let's see. That's really difficult for me. So okay, so there's this movie. So I'm gonna go with one that's really obscure and one that's very much pretty much known. Uh, and that movie's called Contracted. It's a Spanish film, and it's so I don't want to spoil it because it's a one-shot spoiler kind of thing.
Okay.
But it's pretty much watching this character that is not likable from the beginning, and you're not supposed to like her at all. And she goes out partying one night and she gets something. And it's just the whole movie watching her deal with the horror of how that disease or whatever she got, it starts deteriorating her or changing her. And that's. It's body horror and it's very simple and it's very low budget, but it's very effective. I like it very much. And then as for very known movies, I would go with Ari Aster's Midsummer.
Okay.
Because Midsummer, what I like about it is that even though not everything will hit all the buttons for everybody, it's a movie that shows you how to create horror in broad daylight with a bunch of really colorful things. And like that, everything happens pretty much during the day. Most of the movie happens during the day, very sunny, very happy, all of that. And it's just horrible what happens in that movie. And there's an entire theme behind the movie. It's not just people dying for the sake of dying. There's an entire backstory with the movie, and that's why I think it's so good. And in fact, one of the things I can mention of it is that at any moment during that movie, during the day scenes, you can see, like, for example, two characters talking like right here in front of you, and there's always something going on in the background, like people dancing in a weird way or a strange conversation that just feels a little off kilter or something like that. And for me, that disturbed me more than any death and horror that could have happened, because it gave me that feeling of, oh, we're having this conversation here and those people over there are doing something that we don't know about. So what is that thing going on back there? I want to know, because I feel unsafe if I don't know what they're doing.
Yes. Interesting you bring up that point, that movie. There was a 2-hour podcast where a group of psychologists analyzed it, right? And they looked at it as professionals and to analyze mental illness. That was really interesting too, to discover that film. Made me think about issues I know. Well, one, that situation never happened to me, I would hope, right? But what is it going on, like you said before, what's going on that you don't know about? What's going on that you walk into that's going to bite you in the ass if you're not careful? That could happen to anybody else at any particular time. Really.
Yeah, and it's taking culture shock and going like that extra mile. I mean, one thing is going in some place and they serve you, cockroaches for lunch, and for them it's perfectly normal, and for you it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But another different thing is, watching two people jump to their deaths and they see it as this beautiful thing. And for you, it's probably the most horrifying thing you've ever seen.
Absolutely.
So there's that, and it's I think that's why that movie works so well, and it also A lot of people. Well, it's a movie that's been out for a while, so I guess maybe spoiling so much of it.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people complain about the ending, like the death that the girl's boyfriend
Mhm.
gets, because they feel it's kind of silly, that they just put him in a bear skin and then they burn him alive and he can't even move, so it's not even a satisfying death. Um, but that's actually the meaning of his character. The whole reason all of that happened was because in the beginning he was supposed to break up with her because he didn't love her. The whole idea was, hey, you have to break up with this girl because you don't love her, you don't want to be with her. But then just because he felt sorry for what happened to her, he didn't break up with her. He didn't take action. Then he was supposed to tell her, no, we're going alone on this trip, you can't come. Once more, he didn't take any action. All of those things start happening. We all need to leave this place. He doesn't take action. So each of the people that die in the movie represents a sin for the people that are in that
Ooh,
group,
ooh, okay.
and he gets the worst sin, which is cruelty by inaction. That's why his death is literally just sitting in place while everything around him burns and he can't even scream, he can't move, he can't do anything.
Wow,
So that for
wow,
me is the genius of that scene. It looks kind of silly, but it's a very heavy scene if you paid attention to the whole movie before.
that's an incredible viewpoint. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you seen do you remember the movie Wicker Man?
Which one?
Wicker Man.
Oh yeah,
That's a good film.
that
I like Wicker Man. The first one,
yeah
not the one with the Nicolas Cage. Two thumbs
yeah.
up.
The one with Nicolas Cage, yeah, the first one is actually the better. The one with
Yeah,
Nicolas Cage is kind of silly because he just
yes.
goes full ham on that one. Uh, but uh, that's another movie that's I guess it's genius and it's foreshadowing
Yes.
because you have all of these. Well, if I saw it a long time ago, so I don't remember everything, but you have these women that are seducing him,
Trying to.
trying to, and since he's the honorable cop and he's on the job and he's investigating, he doesn't go for it. And if he just had said yes to just one of them, he would have lived.
Right, but
So
they needed to kill a pure person, right?
exactly.
Right.
So the idea was that they were giving him an out, like throughout the whole movie they were giving him an out and he didn't take
He
it.
didn't know what was going to happen to him. I mean, and this idea is we don't know what happens to those people after the movie's done, right?
Yeah.
We don't know if the craps come back or not. We don't know. But with paganism, as in practice back in the day, I don't think they used to be able to come in and kill the prisoners, but they didn't do it as sacrifice per se. We don't know
Mhm.
all kinds of different paganisms, what different pagans did throughout time. I
Yeah.
mean, human sacrifice is very important to some of them. Let's just hope that it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah, and there's that's another thing that where I guess we go back a little bit to Lovecraft and this idea of, oh, we're insignificant. There's so right now I do actually listen to audiobooks a lot because I'm very busy all the time. So I'm listening to the book while I'm maybe like cleaning the house or doing water changes or things like that. But the there's I'm listening to this book. It's by Jason Pargin. He used to go by the pen name David Wong. He has this series of books that start with one called John Dies at the End. And then
Okay.
okay.
There was a
So,
movie too. Did they make it in the movie?
yeah, but the movie wasn't that close to the book. It
Okay.
was, yeah, that's the problem. That's why I always think like horror books or books in general should be made into miniseries instead of movies.
Oh, no, okay, I agree. Okay.
because you cut out so much that you take out the whole meaning. And the thing is, with David Wong or Jason Pargin, what I love about him as an author is that he really brings in the cosmic horror, but he puts it in a way in which it sounds silly, in which it sounds kind of stupid. There's a lot of humor. That's a lot of just being very sarcastic about everything, but the themes that he's touching on are very real and very serious. And like I'm listening to his latest book, which is if you're reading this book, you're in the wrong universe. And the thing about that one is that at one point they start talking about human sacrifice. And it's there's the scientist, and he starts talking about previous cultures that did human sacrifice, and how the what really appeased the gods wasn't so much just the fact that they took a life. They didn't really care about the fact that they took a life. What they cared about was the pain that they were inflicting.
Oh,
So that's why, like, previous cultures, previous cultures here, like in the Latin America area, like the Aztecs, or there's a bunch of cultures here that were here before Columbus came over, or whoever. A lot of arguments about who that was, but before that, there were a lot of human sacrifices, and some of those human sacrifices didn't really involve killing the person. They actually took children, and what they did was that they like forced cavities on their teeth, like in their teeth, like they made holes in their teeth.
Okay.
And I think it was like they pulled their fingernails, and those children were pretty much left in constant pain for a very long time. And if one of the kids died, it was seen as a bad thing because they could no longer offer that kid's pain to the gods. And that was kind of chilling. Like a lot of cultures see it as a thing of pain, but when it comes to pagan cultures, like for example in the case of Vikings, some of the sacrificial rituals had to do with pain, but most of those had to do either with glory or punishment. But then there were those in which it didn't have to do with pain; it had to do with you offering yourself.
Sure.
And it was done in a painless way, that they actually got you like really, really drunk, and they just slit your throat and they took your blood, and that was it, and you died. It was a peaceful death, but it was considered an amazing death because you offered.
Can you send me the name of that deity that they did that things to those kids for?
Oh God, I'm trying to remember it.
You remember it? Just damn it to me.
Yeah, when I'll get it and I'll look for it. I think it was an Aztec deity, but
it makes sense to be Aztecs. Aztecs were some nasty people.
No.
Yeah, interesting, because that is, and if you can remember what that deity was known for doing, like appease you wanted something. That's who you talk to. If you know what that something was, would be really great too, sir. Because I think you're going to have an impact in a book I'm writing. And I hope that I'm wrong.
What was that last part? Sorry.
Sure. I think your idea that you discussed with me about torturing children, right?
Yeah, I was just going back to your whole thought about the pagan religions and sacrifice.
It's more critical than you might think. Might be a key to me understanding a concept that I'm exploring for my next book I'm currently working on. And I hope I'm wrong. God, do I ever, but I don't think that I am. Thank you.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I would hope, like, right now we don't have any, like, actual human sacrifice going on.
Oh, we definitely do. I mean, look this way. I mean, this might be off the topic, but it may not be. Think of all the people, as we speak here in Hollywood, who are doing incredibly weird things to themselves and to others, or allowing other people to do to them, so that they can get that moment of glory in the stage. right? If I do this, I get the starring role. If I do that, I'll get this role here.
Mhm.
If I lose more weight, maybe I take out a limb, maybe I do whatever.
Well,
You know,
that's true. They're pretty much kind of torturing themselves
they are.
for
So we got
success.
absolutely, and that's a sad. What's worse is, and I won't have this straight in my mind yet, is why is it that we seem to have a lot of children being victimized horribly by people in power? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And we know that bad things happen in warfare and everything else, but these individuals were purposely hurting children.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think in a big part it has to do with the concept of what a child is or what a child means to a society
That's
or to
right.
a community. So talking about it, I guess objectively would be like if looking at it from the perspective of a culture that has that sacrifices children, to put it that way. Let's say a cult that sacrifices children. What you're sacrificing there is part of the future of the community,
Right?
and what's the biggest sacrifice that a person can make? Sacrificing their future, because sacrificing your own life, I mean, you are going to die
Eventually.
maybe tomorrow, maybe in 20, 30, 40 years. But if you're sacrificing a child, you're, especially when it's your child, you're sacrificing your own
Right.
future.
Future.
And I guess that's where it comes. And when you take it to a, how would I say, like to a cultural level, to a, how would I say, like to a community level, it becomes, you're sacrificing a big chunk of that community's future for that deity or for in
Right.
exchange for that. And it's not that you're just exchanging it for like the the best car of the year. They exchange it for like ongoing riches or long life or health. That has always been the concept behind
Right.
cultures that do human sacrifice.
Well, we can understand why a culture would sacrifice people in times of want. Okay. We have to. Sorry, Bill. We're really starving to death. You've been selected, random chance, maybe volunteered, Bill, but we're going to sacrifice you to whomever because we
Mhm.
need to eat.
Yeah.
It's one thing which we can understand. We may not like it, but we can understand it. What people understand, which brings us back to the idea of horror, is what happens if you have to find someone and you're going to do horrible things to them in order for you, in order to be enriched. I.e., you and I are going to go out tonight. We're going to go and find some kid. We're going to torture them to death so your book becomes a bestseller, right? And we think that's
Yeah.
absolutely horrible. There's no excuse for that stuff now. The question in horror books is, does that happen? I would say yes. I would say it even
Of
happens in real
course.
life.
I mean, human sacrifice is the bread and butter of horror. I mean, and it's depending on how it's used. I mean, we were talking about like torture porn. We were talking
Yeah,
about Hostel a moment ago, and even if Hostel is just a torture porn movie, what you're looking at there is probably I guess the disturbing part of it, and it happens to me because I tend to be very empathetic. Is that empathic? Sorry, the word slipped my mind. Uh, is that you have rich people paying to have the experience of killing another person that
absolutely.
they see as worth less than them.
They
So
are.
I am paying to be able to kill this person. And that brings me joy. That brings me thrill. And I deserve that because I have money.
Power. I'm running out of power. Here you go. Here's one
Exactly.
for you. Here's one for you. What would you say about an actress that would go to villages and pay people to circumcise their children? She could take their foreskins and make a beauty powder out of it.
I think I know who you're talking to, and
Yes.
so on this one, I mean, even though I live in Costa Rica and we don't have amendments here, I'll plead the fifth. But theoretically speaking, about a person without giving a name or an identity, uh, I think that's being very entitled. That's
Very much
being
so.
somebody that feels they're not doing harm because you're applying your own culture to another culture. Um, because I
And
mean, like for example, like in the U.S., I know it's very common for men to get circumcised,
absolutely,
but in other countries, it's
it
not.
does
Like
guide
in Latin
around.
America, we
Absolutely.
don't get circumcised. It's
Right.
very rare, and so it's like in her mind, it would be like saying, "Oh, it's no big deal,"
It's no big deal.
because in the U.S. everybody does it, so it's not that big deal.
Even though
It's
in
not that
the
big of a
US,
deal. So I can make use of that.
that thing, and
You
you have to
know?
go $100 for trouble. So what? Let's take another step further. Let's say there's a poor, very, very poor third world country in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Let's say these people are really, truly starving to death. Let's say that you have a lot of money. You have a lot of money for the United States government. They're paying you to supervise government programs in a very, 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 very poor country. And of course, now, because you have control of the hospitals and control of the medical system, that you're going to be circumcised or not, that's what's going to happen to you. And when the
Yeah,
government leaders complain, we'll kill them.
yeah, and that's sadly one of the historical things that has gone on in the world all the
Absolutely.
time, which
And
is
those,
like people get this idea of I have power, so if I get the notion that taking this one thing that community has is something that I need, since they are less privileged and more in need than I am, uh, I'll just pay them and they'll give that thing to me, even if it means the loss of their dignity, of their identity, of their culture.
whatever, right? Because I'm better
Yeah.
than they are. It also not only it makes a good horror book because there's all kinds of ideas within within what might be going on. That makes a great horror book. It's more horrible to look at it as a real life, true to story. Because when I'm doing my book on child sex trafficking, right? You look what
Mhm.
happened in an island off the coast of the state of Michigan in the Great Lakes, where they're hauling
Mhm.
kids there to do horrible things to them, and the people in charge were able to escape. Oh, these are
It,
kids. So what's the horror? Is the horror what happened with children is very horrific, or is the horror these people able to use their power and escape, perhaps do it again?
and
Or
the thing is that whenever things like that happen, that tends to be the case. Like if it's somebody that's very powerful, they don't really, they get away with it,
they get away with it. And
or they get a like a public slap on the wrist, and that's it.
yeah,
That's done. That's what usually happens when it comes to celebrities, when it comes to governments, when it comes
stuff
to,
like that.
and it happens everywhere.
Everywhere,
That's one of
absolutely,
the
all the
sads.
throughout time. And that to me is one of the reasons why I write my books on the true crime stuff, right? Is
Mhm.
because you talk about some of these things and you say that can't be going on. It's absolutely can't be going on. And the thing about it that actually did go on, it might be still going on. My God, you know?
If so now that I was mentioning this author David Wong,
Yeah.
uh, his second book his second book is called, so it has the longest title in the universe, but it's a really good book. It was actually a New York Times bestseller. It's called "This Book is Full of Spiders. Seriously, dude, don't touch
Yeah.
it." And that is, I mean, so it's probably the stupidest book you'll ever read, but through humor and through funny, sarcastic, immature characters, it's analyzing that thing that you're mentioning right now, like how a government can get away with a cover up of the murders of thousands,
Yeah.
and they don't, they find ways to hide it, like the book is, this is not a spoiler. If you ever read it, I really recommend it. It's very good. It's uh, it's kind of his take on the zombie apocalypse, to put it that
Okay.
way. His take on the zombie apocalypse, but it's like what happens if the zombie apocalypse starts and the government contains it to this one town, and then
Uh-huh.
the media gets a hold of it, and then all of those people in that town are now expendable.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's really really good, and the funny thing about it is that it touches exactly on what you're saying. It's like that level of not actually paying for what you did, and the whole world being okay with it because that's the way people feel comfortable with things.
And what makes me a good horror book is there's a good one I saw on Netflix. So I think it was called The Minotaur, and it was about these two guys that a friend that's run rave in Central Park, and one day he disappears. So the friends trying to find out what happened to their friend, right? And of course, they discover they was researching this cult. They research too much, and they disappear too, right?
Yeah,
Again, it goes on what's going on
it's
behind the scenes.
yeah, like to take it a little back to my book. Now that we're talking about
Please.
like cults and sacrifices and things like that, so um, all right. So for this, I have to tell you like a story. It's very. I'll try to do it very quickly. So this house I was telling you about that was right across the street from where I grew up. So this used to be a really old Masonic lodge, uh, and the house was just decrepit. It was a two-story house, and it was wooden and all messed up, and nobody went there. The only person that had access to the house was this old man that lived next to the house. He had the rights to the property, and he was the typical like old man you see in the movies that nobody talks to,
Mhm.
and he doesn't talk to anybody. So this house, people just made up all kinds of stories, and I remember the story that my grandma told me, which was that in that house, whenever somebody from that group died, they did this thing called the walking of the dead. And okay, so I'll talk about like the real custom, but I'll talk first about what my grandma told me. What she said was that when somebody died, they went into the house, they did like the whole funeral thingy and chants and screams and cries and everything, and then they brought the person out. They put the coffin down. They brought the corpse out of the coffin, and they started singing to it and playing music, and the corpse would walk.
Oh
And
wow.
they would walk all around town and then all the way to the cemetery where the dead guy would climb back into the coffin and they would bury him.
Oh wow.
Okay. So, and my grandma believed this like for sure that was happening there, you know. Um, Turns out the real custom, the walking of the dead, is a Caribbean custom. Um, that what it involved was just, yes, taking out the coffin after the funeral, just open casket. They would
Mhm.
carry it in a way in which they would display the dead person, and they would parade around
Oh,
the
interesting.
town square, playing music and dancing and celebrating that person's life until they got to the cemetery, and then they buried him.
There you
So if you actually think about it, it's a pretty beautiful
Yeah, absolutely.
way of looking at death. Like
Absolutely.
let's not mourn. Let's celebrate this person's life. But from the eyes of the people in my town, they thought, oh, they're making the dead walk. And the reason they all believed that was because whenever there was a funeral in that house, nobody went out because they thought they were going to see a dead man walking. So in my story, it's taking all of those little stories from my town, but I'm moving them to a fictional town in the west coast of the United States called White
Wow.
Harbor. Um, so what I want to create is this. So when you read it, I want it to feel very familiar. Like, oh, I'm reading a Stephen King book. I'm reading a story about a haunted town. I'm reading a story about a cult in a town. things like that. But then there are the little twists and the little things that might feel a little bit unfamiliar. And for me, that's where horror is. It's this.
Absolutely.
It's taking the familiar and kind of twisting it a little, like when your mirror has this thing in which your face kind of maybe doesn't look quite right. That and so in the story, what it is basically all of these secrets and nightmares and fears and gossip and all of that. All of that is feeding an entity that lives in the town. Okay. And the town is called White Harbor, but the locals have this concept they call Blight Harbor. And Blight Harbor is like this group of all of the, like this conjunction of all of these different things, like this darkness, that they go like, oh no, that's in Blight Harbor, leave it there, let's not talk about it, you know. But now it's getting to a point in which there's a cult in the town that worships this entity. And they know that it's coming to a point in which this mass of darkness has fed the entity enough in which now it's time for their god to come. And so where I want to go with this story what I've mentioned before is this reality behind the reality, is that if this is White Harbor and right behind it is Blight Harbor, at one point I want to do this.
Yeah, I hear that. Interesting. Now, your book, your first book is out now, correct? White Harbor?
Yes, and that's book one. It's called The Local Truth. And I'm already working on book two, which is called Blackout.
And when might Blackout be out by, sir?
So right now I'm publishing it on Patreon, chapter by chapter.
Okay.
I already published the first chapter. I usually have a turnaround time of about 3 weeks. I'm publishing it both in English and Spanish. So I'm writing it first in English, then translating to Spanish. So what I'm doing there is, for the people that subscribe on Patreon, it's just patreon.com/White Harbor as one word. They get the story as it progresses. Then once I finish a book, that's when I compile everything and I publish it on Kindle, and then I continue with the next book in the series. Yeah,
now,
and
your Patreon is there. I'm sorry. In your Patreon, which I'm not looked at, I apologize. Is there an opportunity, if we could share you the correct amount of money, that we can be written in there, or suggest an idea for? Really?
Yes, and actually, so I'm so glad you brought that up. So yes, and I have at this point I only have 3 spots, because one of the 4 spots that I created was already taken, and it was taken by another author that publishes independently. His name is Xavier Pokane. He's amazing, and he paid for that. And what I do is I'm actually integrating him into this role in which he will have his own arc. It's not just I'm mentioning him in the book, like, oh, there's this neighbor, and
yeah, it's so unworthy. How much is this per cost?
That one is $25
a month.
So the regular membership is $3. But for that one, since you get the book, you get the audio narration of the book, you get to become a character with your own arc throughout the entire second and third books. And also at the end of everything, you get a signed physical copy of the 3 books. So that's that level. And I only opened 4 spots for that one, and one is already taken by Xavier.
Let me understand this correctly, because it's might have sold another spot. For the $25 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could suggest you a character with a name, whatever my character. Let's say Bill.
Mm-hmm.
I like Bill. And Bill could have his backstory as he's running away for whatever else. He's come to the city. He's a tour reader. He's doing whatever he can do, get some money from tourists and stuff like that. And Bill can have a series of adventures, as long as we're within the scope of the book, that can go from one book to the next book. as long as it makes
Exactly.
sense within that universe.
Exactly. So the thing is, the idea is that those characters would be involved in the story throughout the second and third books. Okay, and so now it would be an amazing time to sign up because I just started the second book. So I have, how would I say, like I have a general draft of where these characters might fit, but one of the things that I do is one of the things that I do with that tier is that I have two calls. One call, like a video call, to talk about your character. So you tell me a little bit about yourself, about what you're thinking, about everything like that. And then I tell you like, okay, so what I'm thinking is maybe this and this and this and this and this and this. You tell me which are your do's and your don'ts, you know. And then based on that discussion, I draft a character. And then later on, as I'm approaching book 3, we have another call in which we talk about the character so far and where that character might be going next. The idea is obviously for the integrity of my story, the ultimate decision would be mine of what happens with that character, but I want to be able to incorporate as much of, let's say, if you go on that tier, like of who you are, of what you want that character to be, of what you want that character to do.
Can we make it where the guy you wouldn't kill me off?
It is possible.
Okay.
It is possible. It is possible that you could be killed off, but once more, it's. But I would do it in a way in which it just doesn't feel like, oh, well, Bill was walking down the street and then he got killed by a monster by the next chapter, and there went your $25. No, the idea is for me to create something that you will feel like, oh, this character is a character that I contributed to, and that was based on me in a certain way, or on a version of me, and that character is now going on this book forever. You know,
it could be Mr. Big, the mafioso guy, comes to this community to hide out. He finds out this cult. He dies in a glorious gun battle trying to take them out.
Exactly. Wow. It could be anything like that. Ultimately, again, I need to see that it fits within the actual story, but it would be an arc. That's the idea, that character would go through a character arc, that he has a background, that he has a story, and that in one way or another, he will contribute to the general story. That is not just a character that I can just remove and that's it.
Absolutely. So where do we find you online, sir?
So I'm on Twitter. My handle is White Harbor Cult. I'm also on Facebook as White Harbor and on Instagram as Visit White Harbor. I have 3 different handles because, White Harbor by itself is taken. So, And on Patreon, it's patreon.com/White Harbor as one word. And if you look for White Harbor on Amazon, you can find the book both on Kindle and paperback. And the Kindle version for the rest of November is on promotion at $1.99. I really want to get those reviews in. Exactly. That's why
you have my review by the end of the week.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I can easily do that. Probably can actually get a couple more, I think. Now, let me ask you this question. You visit White Harbor. That handle is really cool because you could have a tourist office, a visitor's bureau.
In fact, the very first tier in Patreon is called White Harbor Visitor, and the idea is that it's kind of like you don't live in White Harbor, but you're a what would you call it, like a travel agent.
Okay, I understand.
There you go.
Because you could do a city map. The city, people love that shit.
That I'm doing. That I'm going to do. Probably not as detailed as I wish because I don't think I'm that skilled or have that much time. But I do want to make a full map of the area because it is important. I want the entire terrain to make sense.
Can I suggest something to you?
Sure.
Fiverr.
You
ever heard of Fiverr before? It's a
no.
Fiverr is basically a site we can hire people to do different things, be it computer programming, They do art for you, all kinds of different things. Barbara would be a perfect place to find someone to help you with that type of graphic. Yeah,
That's interesting. I'll look into that.
please.
I'll definitely look into that because I really, for book 2, I really want to make sure that once I compile everything, that I have a map. So I know we're at time, but is there time for me to say one last thing? Or
Sure, you get all what you want.
Okay, so see now there you go. So these 3 books are one story, but are you familiar with American Horror Story?
I
The
am.
show? Okay, so even though the style is completely different, because American Horror Story is a little bit more campy, I guess.
Yes.
This one is more like brooding supernatural horror. This whole thing. What I'm doing is each 3-book set is an entirely different story, but still within the universe of White Harbor. Exactly,
Wow.
but they're completely different stories. You can maybe see a character that appears in this one appear in that one, even if in this one they died. Think of it as different dimensions of the same place.
Ooh.
And I already have the next story already mapped out. So, well, more on a draft kind of outline, but I already have this story and the next one mapped out.
Are you going to do Elder Sign too? You got to do Elder Sign. You have to do Elder Sign. You have to have Elder Sign to protect us from the cult.
I'm sorry.
You heard of remember Lovecraft? He had Elder Sign. You need to have Elder Sign. I really like what you do in your book. Excuse me for being too excited. But I mean,
thank you. I really appreciate that.
No, I mean, to me, one of the reasons why usually I do crime type stuff here, right? Mm-hmm. And what I like doing films, either here or I did my podcast, audio only, is I like talking to authors and filmmakers because the creativity is wild. And you can all kinds of people, all kinds of creative ideas, which inspires me to try different new things, because not everything you think of will work. The idea is getting inspired to try new stuff. Never say die.
Yeah, and if you ask me, my ultimate dream with White Harbor would be to have a TV show or a mini series or something based on the books. That would be my ultimate dream. So who knows? Might happen.
Well, if you were in the United States yourself, it'd be easier to do than you might think it is. But it's kind of hard to do in Costa Rica. But you never know. So
that's a good thing about being online and connected to people, and also I can just travel over there.
You can. We have airplanes. There's such thing called airplanes. Is there a way that we can contact? Is the best way to contact you through Twitter, or do you have an email?
Well, my email address. It's kind of complicated because it's my 2 last names. But yeah, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Either one of those would be a
easy way to hit all of you. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun. I'm sorry I took up so much of my time with my sidebar there, but
no, but that was cool. I loved it.
I learned. I mean, that's the whole. That really helped me think about why some of the shit I'm looking at when I do talking about my book, Evil Among Us, is happening. Cool. There's a reason why shit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to swear. There's a reason why, in my opinion, so much these days is so evil. Anyway, enough of that. I do thank you for your time. It's been very much enjoyable talking to you this evening.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you giving me the space. So, I'm here if you ever want to talk again.
Oh, trust me, we'll be talking to you again soon. But with that, you have a great evening, sir.
You too.
Bye. Bye.